Thank you, all of you. Welcome. I am Peggy Noonan. It is, and I mean this quite sincerely, an honor to be here with all of you as part of this great mission. And it is a true delight to be in a place in which the central subject matter does not involve the 2016 presidential election. Thank you. Thank you. Let me say quickly, I'm going to say a few words, then throw it to the gents. I approach this evening as a celebration of two things. One is FAPE, which is dedicated to the wholesome, necessary mission, I beg your pardon, as I was saying, FAPE, which is dedicated to the wholesome, necessary, and patriotic mission of seeing to it that great American art is available in American embassies throughout the world so that visitors who are not Americans can walk in and see and think what a distinguished and gifted people the Americans are, and how creative and productive is their high culture. This is a worthy and important endeavor. So congratulations to all of you, for you are precisely those who make FAPE possible. Thank you, and onward. The second element around which our evening is organized is a theatrical masterpiece called Hamilton, which this year itself demonstrated that American culture is indeed alive, vital, breathtaking, original, and available just down the street. Well, one of the wonderful things Jeffrey has done is institute a lottery in which actually you can get a ticket for $20. For $10 if you're a real lucky son of a gun.
Ham for a ham.
Ham for ham it is called. My newspaper today, you may have seen, the Wall Street Journal, has a front page story about what is now known as Hamilton anxiety. It is a real thing. It is the shame and embarrassment people in politics and journalism now feel if they have not seen Hamilton yet. Front page Wall Street Journal, go online when you get home tonight. It's a real thing. There are many parts of Hamilton and bits and lyrics and bits of music and staging that have stayed with me and that strike me and struck me from the beginning, from the public theater production, as deeply important. The biggest one for me is one simple line. It is said when things are looking bleak, when the war has begun, when the Americans are struggling through chaos and blood and revolution, and there are 32,000 troops in New York Harbor. It's that moment at which Eliza sings, look around, how lucky we are to be alive right now.
Bless you.
Oh my God, that is so American. We're surrounded by trauma. Ain't it great we're here? We are, of course, all of us at all times lucky to be here. But Alexandra and Eliza, I think, could see into the heart of the fact that every human being wants to stand for something meaningful, be part of something meaningful, be engaged in epic events. It's just good to be here and be trying and be part and be alive. So to me, that was very beautiful as a first point, and it was the first point at which my eyes filled with tears the first time I saw Hamilton. There were others. I think one thing about Hamilton is that, as with all masterpieces, arguably, you can define why it's important and significant and influential. You can say what pleased you most about the production, you can laud its elements, but you almost feel you can never quite capture in words why exactly it's a masterpiece. You know, why is the Mona Lisa a masterpiece? I don't know, it just is. Some essential points about it that probably have something to do with its being a masterpiece. Hamilton makes history human. It gives history a modern sound, which makes history itself seem fresh and new. It takes seriously things we sometimes sneer at, such as personal ambition, the desire to make your mark, to rise. I'm not throwing away my shot, says Alexander, and you understand him absolutely. I'm going to jump ahead here because I'm just eager to hear the guys and not me. I got carried away as I was writing. I didn't want to throw away my shot. Yeah. You're loving it. Thank you. Hamilton also, I do want to make this point. Hamilton insists that personal greatness exists and is real. It isn't all a dumb illusion. It's not a silly story somebody told you that isn't really true. Personal human greatness actually exists, and it existed in that man. It also says life and people are complicated, and something we would all love. I certainly loved it. This simple lyric, in New York, you can be a new man. This is always the city of ambition and the city of, I'm starting over here. I'm going to make it fresh and new. I'm going to rise. So now to the gentleman. Ron Chernow was and is both the seed and the soil in which this masterpiece grew.
Sorry to interrupt.
I'm here to embarrass Ron. He is fabulous. He did it all with his Pulitzer Prize winning biography called Alexander Hamilton, which Lin-Manuel Miranda told me in an interview, but I wrote about the show in the Wall Street Journal. I called it a masterpiece, which is not a word one throws around a lot. So I called up Lin-Manuel Miranda, I introduced myself, and I said, why did you do this? Why did you do a Broadway show about this man? And he said he had read Ron Chernow's fabulous Pulitzer Prize winning biography, and he said to himself one thing. He said, I know that guy. He grokked who Alexander Hamilton was. So Ron, you've made something powerful when an artist says, I know that guy, and makes the rest of us know him. So, fab. Fab. Okay. To Ron's right is Jeffrey Seller, the producer of Hamilton, who saw the promise and the brilliance of it, who helped it come to us and to Broadway and to huge full houses. Thank you, Jeffrey, I want to say, for being an entrepreneur, for taking a chance, for making a gamble. You did not throw away your shot. And I believe you and Lin-Manuel and Ron and the cast and those who mounted the show, you've absolutely changed history by changing the teaching of history in America. 3 people tonight, including Ron, told me about children as young as 5 having memorized the words to the CD of Hamilton and learning history that way. You were the first, but 2 others did. I'm getting lost here. Finally, Christopher Jackson, who plays George Washington.
Bravo.
And takes everybody's breath away. And who makes you cry. It's another point when he says he left after 2 terms as president because he was the first president and he had to teach Americans how to say goodbye. Mm-hmm. And you know, there's 2 things that happen. One is that people go in the audience when he sings about that. And the other thing is that, how to say this, I don't want to be embarrassing. Everybody loves the sight of him, and he's very modest about it, but he makes a real impression on the stage. People go a little crazy over him. He says it's all about the uniform. I assured him this evening, honey, it's not about the uniform. Jesus. All right, so now enough of me, and on to the gentleman. So, is he blushing? I'm so sorry, but I just had to say it.
Totally fine.
All right. So Ron, just to be very elemental, I've never asked you this question. Why, of all of the men and women and founders and others of the founding generation. Why did you zero in on Hamilton? What was it? Did you know that guy?
No, Peggy, I mean, it seems very comical now that Hamilton's name is up in lights on the marquee of the Richard Rodgers Theater, but back in 1998, when I started writing the book, he was really fading into obscurity, and people regarded him almost as a kind of second-tier founding father, not as important as the others. You know, I read a couple of the earlier biographies. I realized that his life story was so much more dramatic and fascinating on a personal level than any of the others. And his list of accomplishments in the war, during the Constitutional Convention, creating the federal government, list of achievements was monumental. So it was rather mystifying. I felt like I was the first one who got there in terms of doing a large-scale biography that combined both the kind of public and the private man. And I think that was one of the things that drew Lynn, the tension between those two, that I went into the marriage, the affairs, all of the personal relationships, as well as all of the political feuds that he engaged in.
So how long from the decision, it's Wednesday morning, 8:38 a.m., and you think, do you know what, I am going to do the Hamilton. Between that moment, researching, traveling, thinking, and then writing, and then thinking and researching some more, how long does it take to do a book like this?
No, it took me 5 years, and sometimes people would say, oh my God, you worked on this every day for 5 years. I felt that I was doing this at a kind of breathless, headlong pace. Hamilton left behind what are now 32 volumes of his personal political and business papers. Each volume is about 500 or 600 pages. One of my favorite stories, I mean, Hamilton was a human word machine. He managed to produce those 32 volumes, you know, in 49 years on Earth, but the papers were edited up at Columbia University by a man named Harold Surratt, who used to joke that Hamilton was so prolific that he wanted to dedicate the volumes to Aaron Burr. Without his cooperation, the project would never have been completed.
Whoa!
Yeah. I mean, imagine if he'd lived a normal lifespan.
So, Jeffrey, when did you first, well, no, I think, Jeffrey, maybe just very quickly before I get to when you first became involved. Ron, when Lin-Manuel Miranda, how did he reach out to you and say, hi, my name is Lin-Manuel Miranda, you're Ron Chernow, you wrote a book, I know who this guy is, I want to do a Broadway musical that has rap and hip hop, and how does that sound to you? Did you think, like, I don't know who you are, but please, you've got to stop taking drugs?
It was a little bit like that, Peggy. I mean, it turned out we had a friend in common. A friend of mine, his daughter went to Wesleyan with Lynn, told me that Lynn had read the book. It made an enormous impression. He wanted to meet me, and he invited me to a matinee of In the Heights, his first show. He was still starring in it at the Richard Rodgers. I went backstage, and after telling Lynn how much I enjoyed the show, I said, so I gather my book made an impression on you. And he said, now famously, he said, Ron, I was reading the book on vacation in Mexico, and hip-hop songs started rising off the page, direct quote. And I said, really?
Wow.
And then he started, telling me, he said, he said this very earnestly, he said, Hamilton's life is a classic hip-hop narrative. And I was standing there thinking, what on earth is this guy talking about? I think it took Lynn about 60 seconds to realize that he had one of the great hip-hop ignoramuses of all time on his hand. But he asked me on the spot to be the historical advisor. And so I laughed and I said to him, so you want me to tell you when something was wrong? And he responded with great fervor. He said, yes, Ron. He said, I want the historians to take this seriously. And indeed, they have. I mean, the historians have really embraced this show. But that, for me, if I had felt when I met Lynn that he wanted to do some kind of satirical or outrageous treatment of Alexander Hamilton, I would have backed away. But I could tell from the beginning that he wanted to do a complex an accurate and dramatic rendering of this story, which is exactly what he's done. So we got along terrifically from the very first meeting.
With a beautiful earnestness, not a heavy earnestness, but a beautiful earnestness about life, I think.
Yeah, yeah.
So Jeffrey, where do you become involved in the story? You are a major theatrical producer. You produced Rent. You produced In the Heights. So obviously from In the Heights, you knew the author of Hamilton, but how does it come about that all of a sudden we're working on a play that's about Alexander Hamilton?
My job as a producer is to follow the artist. It's very rare for the producer to come up with the idea for the musical. The greatest musicals of all time, a chorus line, originate with the artist, with the creators. Les Miserables with the creators. So after the extraordinary experience of working with Lin for 4 years on In the Heights, which started as his sophomore project at Wesleyan University.
Wow.
So his sophomore project became his first Broadway musical, for which he won the Tony for Best Score and we won the Tony for Best Musical. When he says, I'm interested in Alexander Hamilton, my job is to say, what do you got? Mm-hmm. It's not to say, that's a terrible idea. And I think I learned about it just about when everybody did, because the truth of it is that when Lin went to the White House in the spring of 2009, when the First Lady and the President decided to have a poetry night, and this was, of course, in the first 6 months of the Obama administration, he came on stage and he was supposed to do a song from Hamilton for this poetry night. I'm sorry, he was supposed to do a song from In the Heights on this poetry night, and he had written one song for this Alexander Hamilton idea, and he just decided to get on stage and give it a whirl. He'd never presented it in front of anybody before. And he said, this is my next show. But in fact, he'd only written one song.
This is on YouTube, by the way.
Yes.
And you can see both Lin-Manuel Miranda rapping, and you can see the president's reaction. It was very interesting.
Yeah. Indeed. So that's the point of ignition. That's the point where I, as a producer, go, because he has surprised me again. And the value that I'm looking for every time I go into a rehearsal studio with an author is to be surprised. I also am a hip-hop ignoramus. Yeah. And the first time I ever went into a rehearsal studio and saw Lin and Chris and a group of 15 performers sing the opening number of In the Heights when it was in its early-ish stage, because they'd already done it at Wesleyan, but we had a long way to go before we got to Broadway. And this character of Usnavi that Lin played started rapping about life in Washington Heights. And then the chorus started to juxtapose that rap against a more traditional Broadway choral work. I was instantly surprised because I had never heard anything sound like that before, where you took rap and you took Broadway choral music and you meshed them together. That's being surprised.
Yeah.
And hearing Lin talk about in New York you can be a new man is instantly being surprised.
Yeah. You know what? Small thing, but I've wondered about this for years. If you are a theatrical producer on Broadway, do you have people constantly coming to you and saying, I've written a show, I've got a song? Are you sort of overwhelmed with material and perhaps most of it isn't that good, but now and then some of it is good and some of it is great and you go for it? Is that more or less how it goes?
No.
Okay.
You know, I'm not going to say I get 5 scripts a week because it's strange how it works out. I'm actually not so good at reading the scripts as they come into my desk and stuff like that. You know, Rent happened in my life because when I was 25 years old, I went to see this young composer named Jonathan Larson write a rock monologue. And I had never heard the word rock and monologue juxtaposed against each other. I was like, there are rock shows and there are monologues. This was a guy doing something called a rock monologue. And when I went to go see this at a small performance space, and this tall, lanky guy with curly hair and big ears took the stage and started singing all about what it's like to be an unemployed 30-year-old artist who can't get arrested, who can't get his musicals produced, I was instantly rapt. So I wrote that artist a letter the next day saying, I want to produce your musicals. And so Jonathan became my friend at age 25. And then by the time I was 31, we did Rent. So he was part of my group. And what I always tell young folks who are in the theater now is, find your group. And my career has been about finding my group, finding my theatrical family, and rising up together.
Got it. I have a friend who is a broadcaster who gave advice to another friend who is in broadcast journalism a few weeks ago, and she said, stock your ship. Get your ship. It's your ship within the network. Stock it and sail forward. That sounds a little bit like the same kind of advice. So, hello, Christopher. So, I have a million questions for you, and you can go anywhere you want with this. But one of the things, tell me if I'm wrong, you have been in a few shows. It seemed to me when I first saw Hamilton that you all felt, you in the cast, singing, dancing the show, you've mounted it. It somehow felt like more than a show. It felt like a little collective that was on a mission. You seem to me all connected to each other and deeply connected to the material. I guess that's a boring question, but to me it was so distinctive. Am I on the right track when I say that?
I think you're totally on the right track. I think rare is the time that you encounter a piece of work that requires all of you. And not just all of the principals or all of the dance ensemble or all of the musicians or singers, but all of you. And if all of you aren't involved, if all of you aren't committed and willing to give literally the last measure to that particular moment, and then 3 minutes later another moment's going to come, and there are 52 moments in the show in the guise of songs, but it requires every ounce of you. It's going to use all of you. It's going to take your sore shoulder, and it's going to make that ache even worse. And it's going to require that you absolutely give into it. And then by the time you're done, you're empty. And then you go home and you sleep, and you pray, and you eat, and you hug your kids, or you walk your dog. And you find your way that 24 hours later, you are right back in the same position. Because as artists, what greater feeling is there than to have used yourself up so completely that you can barely speak, that you can barely think, but all of that energy has been shared with 1,300 people. And one person's life could be affected, and there could be another Lynn sitting out there.
Oh, I see. And so you might be inspiring future things you can't even imagine.
Absolutely.
In some 8-year-old kid who's out there watching it.
I saw my first musical. Lynn saw his first musical. Jeffrey saw his first musical. Now we're sitting here. And it's a theater's a rare thing that you get to personally affect someone's air. You literally invade the very air that they breathe, and you get to perhaps share a moment of real honesty, of real truth.
Yeah.
And that's why people, I think, it's why I respond. I've never seen the show. But I can say there's a feeling that I leave walking out of this theater that is unlike anything in the thousands of performances that I've ever given in my life, and that is, I have nothing left to give until tomorrow.
So how do you, I've always been curious about this. I am a great lover of the theater. I go to a lot of shows, all sorts of shows. How do you go from, you just gave everything you had for 3 hours, you worked it, you're focused, and you were in the zone, 11 o'clock comes, you are getting a standing ovation, you are pumped, this is fabulous. How do you then go home and go to bed?
It helps that I live in the Bronx. I have a bit of a commute.
But do you stay awake till 2 a.m.? I'm just curious how you do it.
But sometimes I wonder if that's more of a bad habit, or if
Yeah.
or if it's actually possible to sleep earlier.
Yeah.
I don't know.
right.
I think that's sort of in the ephemera.
Just curious.
It's different every single night.
Yeah, maybe it has to do with your circadian rhythm or whatever.
Oh, well, I'm sure that's messed up.
You know what I'm curious about also? I don't know how this happens. The author writes the song. How do you learn the song? Does he show you the sheet music? Does he sit down at the piano and play it and give you the lyrics? How do you learn the song? And then how do you make it yours? I guess that's a cliche, but what I mean is what he's given you is going to be a little bit less, I would think, than what you're going to give of that song. So how does it work? Technically, we live in a world, does he email it to you when you open it up and it's Lin-Manuel playing it?
I've heard all of Lynn's demos, my God. I'm different probably than anyone else that's ever been involved with a Lynn musical, and Jeffrey can attest to this. I met Lynn. He was a fresh-faced kid with way too much energy, sitting behind a piano in the basement of the Drama Book Shop in 2002.
In the basement of what?
The Drama Book Shop on West 40th Street. So I walk in, I meet Tommy Kail, I meet Bill Sherman, who at the time was working on The Heights, and Lynn is sitting behind this piano. He's like, "Hey, how you doing?" And he hands me this piece of paper, and it's not music, it's not sheet music, it's just a page of lyrics. They're couplets. He wrote a little rap that my character in The Heights, Benny, he and Usnavi were going back and forth with each other, playing the dozens or whatever. And so I picked it up really quick. Lynn just kind of plunked out a rhythm on the piano, and he sang his part, and then I just kind of sang. He's like, "Just sing whatever comes to your mind, or whatever you hear." And so I just kind of read the lyrics and kind of went along with him. And 13 years later, it all kind of works the same way. And I tell people I speak Lynn's language. But to be fair, Lynn writes songs specifically for my voice. He writes songs for my voice better than I write songs for my voice, and I write a lot of songs. He has a way, as a composer, he knows what he wants to hear from me. We've spent almost as much time together as anyone that I know on this planet, in terms of just like being close and traveling the world and being in an improv group together. We operate on a level that most sort of actor to composer relationships, we're on a different sort of plane in that regard.
So you got a little something symbiotic
Very,
going on.
very, very much so. Kind of the way that Casey Stengel used to talk to Yogi Bear. Like they just knew each other. You know, Casey could give him a look from the dugout, and Yogi would know exactly, because of the situation, he'd know exactly what Casey was talking about. And that's kind of the way that I am with Lynn. Like I understand where he zigs and where he zags and where he wants to go with certain things. And I don't have to work that hard, because again, he knows my instrument so well that it's not work. I don't think I looked at one piece of music the entire rehearsal process for the show, because I knew he had already played me his demos, and I'd been working on it for pretty much the entire time that he's been writing it. Yeah. And I was just there.
So at one point he looked at you and he said, "By the way, you're George Washington. You could have played any part here, but
I remember
you were
the day
George."
that Ron showed up to the matinee. Yeah. I remember it was one of the few times that I'd seen
previews,
Lynn nervous.
No, rehearsal.
No, I mean, I mean
somebody in the Heights.
In the Heights, the
I
day
beg
you
your
came to see
pardon.
the show. He was sort of to himself. I was like, "Lynn, what's wrong with you?" He's like, "Ron Chernow's here." I was like, "Okay, what's wrong with you?" He's like, "It's got to be a good show." And that was all he said. Prior to that, he had mentioned, he's like, "I got my next thing." And I was like, "What is it?" He's like, "It's about this Treasury Secretary." I was like, "What?" And of course, my next thought was, is there a part for me? A couple of days later, Tommy Kail walked in and he said, "GW." And I thought, oh, wait a second. He's talking about Lynn's new thing. Okay, GWG. Oh, really? George Washington? He said, "Yeah." And I went to Lynn. I was like, "Really, George Washington?" He's like, "Mr. President." And so after the show that night, I ran to the nearest bookstore and bought, lucky for me, the amazing biography of George Washington, written by none other than Mr. Ron Chernow.
Yay!
But I was, I was thinking, Chris, that you were referring to that first rehearsal.
Oh, no.
Where I could remember,
I do
telling
remember that.
Peggy about
The first rehearsal of Hamilton?
Well, it was actually the first time Lynn called me up, because Lynn had been sending me songs as he wrote them via email. He would send 1 or 2 a month, and then he called up and he said, "I'm going to be working with actors for the first time, and I want you to come in and listen." I went to this rehearsal studio in the Garment District, and I opened the door. I kind of very gingerly peered in, and Jeffrey was there, Tommy, our director. Chris was there, and Lynn, and 6 other actors standing in front of music stands. And I looked in, and the first thought that went through my head, which luckily I didn't blurt out, was, "Oh my God, they're all black and Latino." I was thinking 1776. I was thinking, a bunch of late middle-aged white guys, and suddenly here's this kind of very hip, cool, looking, young black and Latino cast. And I could remember, it seems comical and embarrassing now, but I sat down thinking to myself, when everyone leaves, I have to take Lynn aside, and talk some sense into this young man. But then I was watching my own reaction. I think that my own reactions have become the reactions of everyone who's seen this show, that, within the first minute, I was thinking, these are the most glorious voices I've ever seen. Within a couple of minutes, I completely forgot about whatever, color or ethnicity that they had. Then I started thinking, gee, these young black and Latino performers are capturing the fire and the passion, the idealism of the American Revolution in a way that I had never heard before. They were making it exciting and immediate and accessible. And, it was one of many times that one of Lynn's inspirations and Tommy, our director's inspirations, it would kind of burst on me, because I was always slow on the uptake to see these things. Like I was saying before, when Lynn first told me that it was going to be hip-hop, or partly in hip-hop, and I said to him, well, can hip-hop be vehicle for telling this kind of complex historical story? And he said to me, "Ron, I'm going to educate you in hip-hop."
Make you a
immediately
mixtape.
Sensed, how much I needed to be educated. And he started pointing at things that are very central to the show to this day. Hip-hop, the lyrics are very dense and rapid, so you can pack an enormous amount of information into it. We really have kind of a 5-hour history lesson in this 2-hour, 45-minute show. He started talking about all the rhymed endings, internal rhyme, internal wordplay. And gradually, of course, Lynn saw this, in a flash of inspiration. Being a little bit slower than Lynn, it took me time to see this. But the marriage of Hamilton's life and hip-hop was just so ingenious, because Hamilton, particularly as he's presented in the show, is so intense and driven and almost kind of frenetic.
Yes.
That when you match that to this very kind of rapid, pulsating music, it not only is perfectly compatible, but the effect of the driven life and the driven music is explosive. And the audience is kind of captured on this great wave of sound and music and motion. And that comes from this extraordinary interchange between Hamilton's personality and the musical form that Lynn used to tell the story. I admit it took me a little while to see this, but Lynn saw it all in a great flash.
When did Chris and Jeffrey, when did you know all of a sudden, you may have thought at some point you were part of a great success. You may have thought, this is going to work. We're going to go from the public to Broadway. But at a certain point, you must have come to understand this is a phenomenon. What was that point for you, if that point came?
The first time that we did it in front of an audience, I didn't know that it was going to, I don't know that anyone can talk about the scale of a reaction of the public.
Yeah.
Not the public theater, but the public at large. But the feeling that I had,
Yeah.
and the benefit of being in the public theater in the Newman, it's such a prestigious and historic venue, but there's only 300 seats in it. You literally can see everyone's expression throughout the entire, telling of the story. My God. I had never experienced anything like it. And I was in the opening number of The Lion King the very first night. Like, I saw those faces.
Yes.
That was till then, that was
kind
the
of
biggest.
a phenom too.
It was.
Yeah.
But this was just
Somehow different.
so different. this was so different. There's no bells and whistles.
When
There's
I
just
saw it,
us, you know?
when I first saw it, I was like sitting over there. It was about 7, 8, 9 rows back. And I'm telling you, at the end of the show, when you came out and were applauded and bowed, I saw tears in the eyes of some of the cast. I was struck by that. But when you are in the cast looking out at the person in the 6th row, do you see the tears in their eyes? Can you sometimes see that people are seriously moved?
Sure.
So, Jeffrey, when did you know it was a phenomenon? That it was making some kind of historical difference that was kind of unique?
Yeah, my first job is to ask, how can we make this better? So I'm always trying to not get so close to the material that I can't see it with a little bit of distance and with a little bit of critical analysis. So in the years that we were working on it, I knew Lynn was doing something great, but it was just another great show we're working on.
Yeah.
It was one of my good musicals that I believed would be successful, like I believe all of them are going to be successful. And sometimes I'm right and sometimes I'm wrong. What was happening with Hamilton was that as we were progressing, we did a workshop in the spring of 14. So we did a workshop, basically 8 months before we started our performances at the Public. And we did it in a 150-seat theater on the West Side called the 52nd Street Project. And we did 4 performances for 150 people. So 600 people got to see that. And something happened at that workshop in which Tommy and Andy staged Act 1 with the choreography. They used some costume pieces to try to figure out the style of the costumes. And then all of Act 2 was with actors on the music stands because there just wasn't enough. We couldn't stage this thing in 4 weeks. In 4 weeks, they could only stage Act 1. And unlike every other show I've ever developed, including Rent, Avenue Q, In the Heights, people who I trust came up to me after and said, that was the best thing I've ever seen.
Whoa.
And I was like, get out of here. What are you talking about? It's a good show. But a diverse group of people said, that's the best thing I've ever seen. And that took me aback. So I certainly knew then that there was some chemistry in the air that no one had found a name for yet.
Okay. I'm noticing we're going over our time here, but Ron, I want to ask you about, I'm not sure what the question is, so I'll just tell you what's on my mind. Everybody who sees the show becomes enchanted by the figure of Eliza. When she comes out at the end and she says, I lived 50 years beyond him.
I stopped wasting time on tears. I live another 50 years.
Oh my goodness. And then when the refrain comes in where they say the orphanage, which was of course the last time everybody starts crying, because she indeed set up the first orphanage, Eliza, in New York that I think was for the children of the revolutionary generation. So she helped bring those kids up. But John Studzinski's, who is here, noted something else. Eliza, in that ending soliloquy, if that's the right word, says that in the 50 years that she lived, she became a force against slavery. She joined the abolition movement. But it was John who pointed out to me, he said not only that, but she met with Abraham Lincoln to talk about abolishing slavery, which is not in the show. Is that true? Did Alexander Hamilton's widow, Eliza, who lived 50 years after him, meet with another great, in a way, a metaphorical founder named Abe Lincoln?
Well, in 1848, they laid the cornerstone for the Washington Monument. And standing in the crowd that day were Elizabeth Schuyler Hamilton, Dolly Madison, and a one-term congressman from Illinois named Abe Lincoln.
Oh my God.
I don't know, maybe someone else knows this for a fact. I don't know that they actually talked that day, but it's a very, very touching moment because it's a moment where the revolutionary generation
Oh my
and the
gosh.
Civil War generation kind of touch, these two
Yes.
separate periods of history. But just, on Eliza, one of the things I was proudest of in the book, and one of the things I'm proudest of in terms of involvement with this show, is that, in years past, everyone knew Martha Washington, Abigail Adams, Dolly Madison.
Yes.
Not one person in 1,000, maybe not one person in a million, knew anything about Elizabeth Schuyler Hamilton. She was a very kind of modest and self-effacing woman who had consciously written herself out of the
narrative.
story.
Yeah.
And as I started learning about her, she was an extraordinary woman. And one of the things that touched me most deeply in terms of my involvement with Lynn was that, Lynn, in creating the show, was going through a very parallel process to that of writing a biography. And so when I was writing the book, I did not want to end the book with the duel, because I thought that that would be, for a very kind of, rich and full life, that would be a rather cold and violent and depressing way to end the book. So he's shot by Burr and then carried off stage, and the book ends. So I got this idea of doing an epilogue that would be a kind of warm, golden, elegiac ending of Eliza as an old woman looking back through the eyes of love on this life. And, Lynn didn't, until very, very late in the game, maybe at the 52nd Street workshop, I didn't know how he was going to end the show. And then was it at that show? Was that the
We
first
actually
time
didn't get to the full ending till the public theater. He
Yeah.
had not yet really
Yeah.
gotten to the real ending till we got to the public.
It
I
was
can
a
remember-
brave ending, too, because it was not Alexander ending it. There
Exactly.
was something very brave and surprising.
No, but I could remember whatever performance that was, where I for the first time saw that final scene, and suddenly, the cast was parting, and Philippa Sue, who so beautifully plays Eliza, suddenly Philippa was emerging. I was sitting there saying, "Oh my God, Lynn is doing my epilogue." He's kind of following it, and you're right. It's such a gorgeous ending, and even in the final moments of the show, the way that Lynn kind of ushers her towards the front of the stage, so the
Yes.
final moment, as the spotlight kind of, closes on Eliza, the last moment of the show is Eliza's. And there's kind of a beautiful humility to that moment in terms of putting her in the spotlight, a humility that I think is very true
Yeah.
of Lynn and of the show.
All right, just finishing up here very quickly, gentlemen. Jeffrey, what show are you working on now? Which is to say, what should we get tickets for 2 years in advance? Can you tell us? And Ron, I'm going to ask you who you're writing a biography next of. Didn't you like that grammar? I'm going to ask you what you're working on, and I'm going to ask you also what next for you. Jeffrey.
My first job is to ensure that 2 years from today, instead of there being one Hamilton on Broadway, there are 5 Hamiltons throughout the world. So we're actually going to make 4 more Hamiltons over the next 4 years to put in London, and then 3 cities throughout the United States.
Oh my goodness. Fabulous.
And because I always want to have at least 3 more shows on the burner, right now I'm working on a beautiful piece with the fantastic American man Jules Feiffer of a musical called The Man on the Ceiling, based upon a novel, a young adult novel that he wrote 20 years ago, that is a labor of love and passion as well. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Jeffrey. Ron Chernow, great historian, great biographer. Where are we going?
Well, I'm hoping next year to publish a biography of Ulysses S. Grant. And I've written most of it
Wow.
actually during the run of the show. And Lynn asked me one day, said, "How's Grant going?" I said, "Believe it or not, Lynn, I've written most of the book, while the show has been on." And he said, "Really?" And I said to Lynn, "That's because of you. There's been something so inspirational about my involvement with the show that I somehow sit down every morning to write with a renewed sense of purpose."
Okay. Any chance, do you think we'll be having a rap hip-hop version of U.S. Grant coming down the pike? Let's hope.
All I could say is Lynn has not asked to see the Grant manuscript.
All right, and Chris, I hope you're staying. I've been so impressed by the people. You're all so loyal. You stay with the show. But are you thinking in the future what might be your plans?
Tomorrow.
Tomorrow is your plan. All right. Good plan.
That's a good plan for me.
Guys, thank you. You're so wonderful. Thank you. You have given your country a great gift. Thank you. And thank you, all of you.